to be about dance drama. Now, within dance dramas, there are, of course, a couple of things that I'll be covering, and then we will move towards literary theory, which we'll be covering tomorrow. And then, towards the close of the session on Wednesday, we'll talk a little bit about the revival through digital media, which I think some of the participants had asked me. So, I have collected some websites which are talking about revival, so that we'll cover. Towards the last session. I have already shared a couple of research articles with the NLD office, so I think they'll be sharing it with you shortly. So I guess the materials will be shared. Sunil, please mute पे कर लीजिए. All the participants, kindly keep your cell phone mute because background voice is really difficult for me to speak. So please keep your cell phone mute. Sunil, sir, can you please keep your cell phone mute? आप अपने को mute पे डाल दीजिए, please. Okay, we will start the session. I'll be quickly sharing my screen. Please give me a minute. Okay, so I hope my presentation is visible. We will begin. I have, like I said, I have shared a couple of research articles which will be forming the basis of whatever we have done. You will get a quick glimpse of that in those research articles. And those research articles will also help you form a little bit of background within storytelling. Sunil ji, can you please keep your cell phone mute? आप म्यूट भी कर लीजिए अपने को प्लीज. Okay, so I think we have to begin from here. Okay, so we will begin from here. Like I had discussed last time in Rasa theory, there are four primary emotions, and of course there are others as well. But these are the emotions that we were talking about. So you have Hasya, you have Bhayanak, you have Rudra, you have Karun, you have Veer, Adbhut, Bibhats, then you have Shanti, you have Shringar. So these are the primary emotions that you are having within the Rasa theory. And again, like I said, there are a couple of people who have written about Rasa theory, about the emotions. Can somebody please ask him to keep on mute from the organizers? It's very disturbing. Can you please keep your cell phone mute? आप please mute पे कर लीजिए. The organizers please ask you to keep himself on mute. It's very disturbing, the background noise. Okay, so I was talking about the basic human emotions that are covered within the Rasa theory, and from the same place we will be continuing with we will also be talking about how do those emotions reflect within dance drama. Dance is all about the expression of emotions, so we will be continuing. So again, let's continue with this. So again, been a couple of people who have talked about dance drama. Jairaz Boy wrote about music, that music in the Indian subcontinent is a reflection of diverse elements. So when we talk about story, days we have looked at various storytelling forms, that are talking about the inclusion of music and dance in their storytelling form. So again, we have music playing a very, very important role. So music in the Indian subcontinent is a reflection of the diverse elements. Now, what are the diverse elements? You have the religious, you have the linguistic, you have the cultural, that make up the major population of the area. So music is an important part of our ethos. Very, very important to our cultural fabric. So, music plays a very important role. Please just give me a minute. I will just 1 second, please. Yeah, I think now it's much better. Okay. Yes, please, participants, make sure that you are keeping yourself on mute, because it disrupts the flow of the presentation. So it's very distracting for me to pitch in again and again. So please keep yourselves on mute. That would be really helpful. Okay, let's continue. So I was talking about music and dance being a very important part of storytelling. In the last, we had talked about Yakshgan. We had talked about, various dance dramas where music is playing a very essential role. Dance itself is incomplete without music. Okay, so music again is very important. Um Now, like I said, there are different musical types. There are n number of music types. But I think Indian music in particular dates back to 2000 years old. So we have the Carnatic music form, we have the classical music form, and the ancient music forms are of course unchanged to this day. Is the use of a drone. So there's a continuous humming sound. So even within storytelling, even there are a lot of plays which are done where in the background they'll keep playing a background music that can be a very light Indian classical music which is being played in the background. Then I had also talked about that there are various instruments that are used in storytelling formats. Like for example, you have manjira, you have sarod, you have sitar. These instruments are heavily used in Indian classical music. Now again, like I said, that there are different ragas in music. So there are 7 ragas. They are called as saptaka. So within saptaka, you have they are derived from modes or jatis. So they are sa, re, ga, Gandhar grama, then you have Madhya grama, then you have Panch grama, then you have Thevatik grama, you have Nishad gram. So one of these 7 sa and par pure notes. So all of this is very technical information. Why I'm telling you this is because I feel that when we talk about dance, drama, music, or even when we talk about Indian theatre, music, without music, any form of theatrical art form, or even dance as an art form, is incomplete. So hence I'm getting into a little bit of details. However, these details are not important. What you all need to remember is how music plays a very pivotal role in the formation of storytelling and dance dramas. Now coming to how this tradition of music started. So it started with, of course, the Samaved, which is talking about the shlokas that were put to musical notes. The present day musical terminology stems from the Natya Shastra by Bharat Muni. Again, we are going back to Natya Shastra, which I again said that Natya Shastra can never get old. Why? Because everything that we talk about in the contemporary, theater, or in the contemporary storytelling scenario, all stems from Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra. So again, this is going to be about 2nd to 5th century, from 2nd century BC to 5th century AD. Also, Natya Shastra is not just about rasa theory. So I would like to clear myself over here. There are many, even some of my students have come up to me and said that, is Natya Shastra only about rasa theory? I said, no, you only read rasa theory because, that is what is considered to be a very seminal part of Natya Shastra. Otherwise, Natya Shastra is a very lengthy treatise. But anyway, so within Natya Shastra, it has 6 chapters on music. Then there's another text called Brihadesi. Now, Brihadesi was written by Matanga between 8th and 9th centuries AD. In this work also, ragas were first named and discussed at length. Then, of course, you have Jayadev of Orissa, who had produced the Rag Kavya, his work, Gita Govind. Now, Gita Govind is again a beautiful work, marrying the forms of music and storytelling, talking about the love story of Krishna and Radha. Then you have the 8 moods of a heroine. So, we always talk about the hero's emotions, the hero being larger than life. But in fact, even if you look at Abhijana Shakuntala, so in that play, Shakuntala is the one which is actually at the center of all desires. It's not Dushyant who's at the center. If you look at it closely, if you do the feminist reading of the text, or if you read the play from the 21st century reader's perspective, you'll also come across that Shakuntala is the one who's driving the play to a large extent, not Dushyant so much. Not to say that Dushyant is not an important character, but yes, in these plays, the causation of emotion is through the women. Right. So here, he is talking about the 8 moods of the woman called the Ashtanayika. Nayak is the hero, Nayika is the heroine. Then again, this is again an inspiration for Indian classical dancers. Then Abhinav Gupta's Abhinav Bharati is now a commentary on Natya Shastra. So Natya Shastra is never considered as one text which is saying everything right. Even the critics back in the day were commenting on each other's work. So Abhinav Gupta is now coming in and commenting on Abhinav Bharati. During the medieval ages, of course, I had given you, a fleeting example of Rumi, who also was talking about, the Sufism, how he found peace with the tradition of the Sufi saints and mystics. So Sufi and Bhakti saints are there. Bhakti tradition is becoming very important. In fact, a lot of religious storytelling actually stems from the Bhakti tradition. So Bhakti tradition is anyway very important. Then you have Kabir, you have Mirabai, you have Surdas, you have Chandidas, who called Tulsidas, Vidyapati. All of them are talking about, the Bhakti tradition. Then you have great scholars like Amir Khusro, you have Baz Bahadur and his wife Roopmati. Baz Bahadur Roopmati, it's a very famous story, again a love story. So Kitab-e-Navras was written by Adil Shah. I had told you that in the medieval period, Mughals were great patrons of, art and culture, particularly of storytelling. So all of these texts are coming. You have Tansen, who is again a very famous musician in the court of Akbar. He's also one of the Navratnans or 9 jewels of his court. I would just excuse myself for a minute. I guess I need to attend to the door. Just please excuse me for a minute. I'll be back. Just a second, please. Okay, so sorry for that. I'll be continuing now. So yes, we were talking about the Mughal rulers and how they also propagated a lot of storytelling. Like I was talking about, Tansen, I was talking about the Navratans or 9 jewels of the court. Also, it was believed that with his songs, that he could bring showers with his Meghraj. So Meghraj is basically the song for the, invocation of rain. Then Biju Babra was another famous musician of, Akbar's court. According to Lanpool, who's a scholar, he says Babur himself was fond of music. He's supposed to have developed some very popular music styles like Qawwalis, Khayal. Humayun was said to have illustrated Indian texts on music. Akbar composed songs and encouraged musicians. Swami Haridas and his disciples composed many songs. Pundarika Vittal was a great scholar of music who wrote the famous Ragmala. Hindustani music, again, like I said, so Hindustani music, of course, like I said, has a very old tradition of bhakti. So within the bhakti tradition, you are having Mirabai, you're having Tulsidas, you're having Surdas. In fact, some of their dohas are still taught in Indian schools. So again, these traditions are very, very old, and it is from these traditions that a lot of storytelling is also coming, because storytelling is not plain and simple narrating a story or narrating some some fictionalized narrative. It is more than that. It is, of course, including music. It is a form of entertainment at the end of the day. So definitely there will be a lot of music, there will be a lot of dance. So when we talk about dance drama, we first need to understand what is the relevance of music within dance dramas. And of course, dance dramas, we will be coming back to the art of dancing. Now, dancing, of course, has its roots within the Harappan dynasty. We all must have studied about the bronze statue of a girl who's doing a dancing pose, which means back in 2500 BC, the dance as an art form had already become very popular. Again, coming back to Natya Shastra, technical knowledge of this art form as well. So dance, which is the reason why I took both dance drama and storytelling, because I think storytelling is incomplete without the inclusion of dance drama. So they both overlap with each other. The only difference being that within storytelling, you can have a simple story being narrated with music, or you can have a dance form which is telling a story, as it happens in Kathak and other art forms. So now he used dance which has only beautiful movements called Nrit. Okay, so Nrit, like we say that, na, Nrita or Nritya, that is a theme to be mimed, is known as Nritya. So it is learned that earlier there were two styles of dance forms: the manly and forceful Tanda, which was performed by, of course, Lord Shiv, and then you have the feminine dance form Lasya, associated with goddess Parvati. And sometimes both of these are combined, so it's not very rigid that a woman cannot perform a Tandav. In fact, in a lot of Indian dance forms, we have seen that women perform very powerful dance forms. Even sometimes they do the Tandav. So again, like I said, Shiv and Parvati, they are, they complete each other in a sense. So it's not that a woman is only, restricted to performing the Lasya, or a man is restricted to performing the Tandav. They can overlap with each other in the most beautiful forms, which again is the beauty of, storytelling through dance drama. So where Tandav comprises of 108 poses called Karanas, built into sequences called Angharas. Lasya is an interpretive dance having 10 to 12 love motifs. So a lot of dance drama has to also be interpreted by the audience. Now, it's not that dance drama can exist in isolation. It has to be interpreted by the audience. So you cannot have a dance drama which is just happening and the audience is sitting in isolation. No, the audience has to interpret, because within storytelling, the bigger advantage is that in a storytelling format, you are being narrated some story and you can understand it. But in a dance drama, it's the complete opposite. So it's happening on stage and you are the one who then becomes an active participant in that form of storytelling as well. Now again, like I said, there is of course the classical solo South Indian dance, Bharatnatyam. So from Bharatnatyam, you are, so from Lasya, which is related to the feminine form of dancing, you have Bharatnatyam. Then again, the tradition goes back to the Vedic times. Everything, like I said, actually comes from Shruti and Smriti literature. So you can have, every answer in your Vedas because they are a complete treatise in themselves. And then you have the Natya Shastra, which is compiled by Bharat. So according to which the gods approached Lord Brahma and urged him to create a fifth Veda, which unlike the other four would not have the privilege of the three higher castes. Now here I would also take a moment and pause and talk about the, the exclusion of the lower stratas of society from the Vedic literature. Now, Vedic literature had its own set of problems. One of the problems was that within Vedic literature, even with Sanskrit, the problem with Sanskrit is that when Sanskrit is used, it often is a language. It was earlier called a priestly language because it would only be accessible to the upper classes of society. Only much later was Sanskrit, taught to other classes. So it was a very limited circle which was talking about these texts. So hence these texts were also an example of class privilege because, a class privilege, caste privilege, because only some people could access them. Even though they were Shruti and Smriti literature, but still the people who were being told these, texts were the ones who were the upper classes. Also because Sanskrit was the language of the upper class, hence everybody could not learn Sanskrit. So later on, other languages started becoming popular and hence people started getting, they got to know about these seminal texts of Indian literature. So again, like I said, caste politics is everywhere. So much so it is there in oral storytelling as well. Sometimes, however, storytelling forms can talk about how caste politics happens, how there's a problem of classes, castes, and other things. Like in one of my sessions, I had told, I had talked about how in Rajasthani, storytelling forms, they might take an issue of child marriage, but they would include it in a very light-hearted way, not to make the matter very serious, but then still they would drive a point home. So hence storytelling becomes a medium to talk about serious issues with the general public, not with people, who are studying literature or who are studying about social issues, etc. So that again comes over here. So coming back to the point, they decided that, okay, let's make another fifth Veda. So Lord Brahma then gave Natya Veda, which could be read So Partya, the intellectual content of which Brahma took from the Rig Veda, that which could be sung, the Gan, and for which he took from the Samved, the Abhinay from the Yajurved, and the Rasas by Bharat Muni, and the emotional content from the Atharved. So Lord Brahma then asked Vishwakarma, the divine architect, as we all know him. In fact, I think in September itself, we have an event called as the, Vishwakarma Puja, where we basically, worship the work of architects and engineers, because he also was known to be, an architect and an engineer as well. So to construct a playhouse in which sage Bharat was asked to put into practice the new Veda. So now this is all, of course, this is not, we don't know if this actually happened in reality, but because we are tracing the tradition back to from where it started, we assume that yes, this must have happened, because Natya Shastra was very much in practice before it became popular. So it was not that it was a book which was written and then it's not only today that we are reading it. No, it was very much in practice. So now, Bharat's Natya Shastra, the fifth Veda, was to serve as a resting place for those who are grieved, weary, unhappy, or engaged in an arduous discipline towards bestowing righteousness, or long life, fortune, increase of reason, affording counsel to the world, etc. Now, again, like I said, a performance is considered accomplished if it manages to invoke rasa by invoking bhava as gestures. So abhinay or expressions are successfully achieved in a performance through the following ways. So now, whether be it a dance drama, be it any form of storytelling, these four ways can be used. One is the angika, which is the movement of major and minor body parts. This we'll also be talking about in rasa theory, so because there are two ways of evoking emotion. One is the angika. Angika is the body language. Then vachana is the thing that you speak. So vachika or vachana, some places you will see it written as vachana, some places as vachaka. Then you have the aharya. Aharya is the costume. And we all see that even during Ram Leela, when Ram Leela is performed, they wear elaborate costumes which are made over a period of 6 months, 7 months. The costume, because it's not that they are the characters; it's that they have to invoke the characters within themselves. So you will see that the Ravan will have 10 heads attached to him. Lord Ram will have the bow and the arrow, and then he has to also learn the art of archery, at least for that particular day when he's going to kill Ravan. So in Ram Leela, the costumes are very elaborate. And if you must have seen that even if there's a man or there's a boy who's playing the character of Sita, that person also comes in full makeup, in full costumes. It's just so that it can be more believable. And perhaps that is the art of storytelling, that it has to be made believable. Otherwise, again, it's all fiction. Then, of course, we have the Sattvika, which is the moods and emotions. So these four parts become very important. Angika, Vachika, Aharya, and Sattvika. Now, the Sangeet Natak Academy recognizes 8 Indian classical dance forms. So we have Bharatnatyam coming from Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka, Kathakali coming from Kerala, Manipuri from Manipur, Kathak from Uttar Pradesh. We have talked about Kathak earlier as well. Odissi from Orissa, Kuchipudi from Andhra Pradesh, and Satriya from Assam. Now, Satriya has been recently included. So again, it's an Assamese art form. Now, again, these are not things which are not around us. So if we go to if we go to the any South Indian temple for that matter, or any temple which are having the gopurams, so we'll see that they will depict Bharatnatyam poses. They will depict a lot of storytelling forms. So, like I said, storytelling is all around us. It's not in one form or the other. It's everywhere around us. Everywhere around us in India, if we look at it from that lens, we will find storytelling. So storytelling is not particularly, it cannot be read in isolation. Then you have the Abhinay Darpan. Now, Abhinay Darpan by, Nandi Keswara is a major textual source for the study and technique of body movement in Bharatnatyam. So you have Abhinay Darpan. Again, like I said, these names are not important. What is important is that we understand the roots of storytelling. So there are 3 domains. One domain is what we have talked about already, which is your storytelling forms. One is dance drama, and then the third one is the inclusion of inclusion of literary theory, or the application of Indian literary theory and aesthetics to understanding these forms. So right now, the texts that you're coming across, these texts are basically, they help us to understand these art forms, because they can be quite overwhelming to be read in that sense. So even Rasa theory helps us to understand a lot of theatre. Similarly, for Bharatnatyam, you have Nandi Keswara's Abhinay Darpan. Then this is Ekharya dance, where a singular dancer performs many roles. So again, Bharatnatyam, great way of storytelling. You will see that, I think recently there was a performance which was applauded, where, this girl had actually performed the entire Ramayana from beginning to the end, just through dance movements. So the, or I don't know if it was the entire Ramayana, or if it was a particular khand from Ramayana, but she had done something like that, and just through movements and facial expressions, no dialogues, nothing. So again, like I said, dance dramas can tell an entire story. What really matters is how much we are able to interpret. So we have to be actively involved when we are observing a dance drama. So now coming to, again, there is a very, very popular dance form called the Dasiyattam. Now, why this is popular, but in a negative way? Why? Because these were performed by women who are called as Devdasis. Now, Devdasis are another symbol of traditional, because now they were young girls who were gifted by their parents to the temples and married to the gods. Hence, it was believed that they were given away to the gods, and it was believed that now, God will take care of them. Of course, the Devdasi tradition has long been critiqued. It is even practiced in some parts of, Western UP, particularly in Mathura, Vrindavan. We do have a lot of Devdasi culture, even to a certain extent in Varanasi. So it's not just Tamil Nadu, it's actually everywhere. The tradition of Devdasi still exists. Now, again, there's been a lot of criticism of the Devdasi tradition, which we will not get into, because that's another, lens of looking at this entire thing. But we will talk about Dasiyattam, which is basically a dance form performed by the Devdasis of Tamil Nadu temples. Now, coming to Bharatnatyam, begins with Alarepu. So Bharatnatyam again has many parts, beginning with adorned with flowers. Then it's followed by Jati Swaram. Then again a pure dance piece is performed. Then you have Shabdam and Varnam, combination of Nritya and Nrita. Then the dancer performs Abhinay, expressing a variety of moods. Performance ends with a Tilana originating from Tarana and Mangalam, invoking the blessings of God. Kathakali, coming from Kerala, the ritual performing arts of Chakri Kuthu, Kodiyattam, Krishnattam, Ramanattam. They have a direct influence on Kathakali. And according to the legend, the refusal of Zamorin of Calicut to send the Krishnattam troupe to Travancore encouraged the Raja of Kotakara so much that he was inspired to compose the Ramanattam. The dance depicts the square and rectangular basic positions. Kathakali is a combination of all possible elements of. So again, largely Kathakali is again the amalgamation of all these elements put together. Now we will of course come to the four aspects of Abhinay which I've talked about, which is Angika, Aharya, Vachika, Satvika, along with Nrita, Nritya and Natya aspects. Now the weight of the body is on the outer edges of the feet, which are, now again this all is very technical, so we will not get into this. What I was trying to explain over here is that the point which I'm trying to drive home is that dance drama is as expressive as oral storytelling. So words are not always important for telling a story. A story can be told through any form. It can be just told through music, no words required. Only through actions. There are a lot of plays which are silent plays. There are no words spoken. So it's all through actions that they're trying to tell the actions to one another. Then we have again, I will come to Kathak, because Kathak is again considered to be a very, very expressive dance drama. Now we have again Kathakali is again coming, the textual part of Kathakali is coming from Balarama Bharatam and Hastakalshana Deepika. So these two texts are important when we talk about Kathakali. Then again, you have the nuances of the dancers who are doing the Kathakali. Now coming to Kathak, which I have already talked about, again coming from Awadh, is derived from the word Katha, which means a story. Now, Kathak actually originated as an oral tradition where basically stories were told. There was no dancing happening. But later on, in order to make it more, I would say, appealing, and maybe their intention was to gain a larger audience, what they did was that then they started including miming and gestures to make the storytelling more effective. And then Kathak dance form is mainly centered on the Radha Krishna. So the emergence of Ras Leela in the Braj region, this I've already talked about. So in the Braj region, which again would largely now combine with a modern day, present day Mathura, present day with Vrindavan and all these places, that is actually the Braj region. So that is again a very important development in Kathak. So it combines music, dance, and the narrative. But dance and Ras Leela was an extension of the basic mime and gestures of the Kathakars, which blended easily with the existing traditional dance. Mughal rulers gave a great impetus to this dance form. Actually, during the Mughal time, this along combined with the Bhakti tradition is when Kathak actually flourished along. So from temple courtyards to darbars, and that is the time when also it started changing. So from just being about Radha Krishna, it became more sensuous, it became more graceful, it became more expressive. Then the golden age of Kathak was of course under Wajid Ali Shah, who established the Lucknow Gharana, like I've already told. I come from Lucknow myself, so I can definitely say that Kathak and particularly the Lucknow Gharana is considered to be very expressive, very sensuous, very graceful. And now ankle bells or ghumru are worn by the dancer. But again, everything is very technical in Kathak because you have to control the music. The music should not overpower the emotions. The music should not overpower the storytelling. So if you're telling a particular story, music should be in the background. That should not overpower your performance. Okay, now coming to, I think we have already discussed this, so we will come to Manipuri. Now, Manipuri, again, coming from the northeastern state of Manipur. Manipuri is actually a dance form where there are not so many changes. Dance drama where the changes are very less. So Lai Haroba is the earliest form of dance which forms the basis of all stylized dances of Manipur. So you have the principal reformers are the Maibas, who the priests, and the Maibis, the priestess. This again is influenced by the Ras Leela dances which originated during the reign of King Bhagyachandra. So Manipuri is accompanied by a singing known as Sankirtan. So again, singing, dancing, storytelling all combined together. Then you have Odissi coming from Odisha. So in Odissi, again, the regional variations are mentioned in the Natya Shastra. One such variation is the Odhra Maghat, which is the southeastern style, is identified as the earlier precursor of present-day Odissi. So now the faith of Jagannath. So again, Lord Jagannath is one of the presiding deities in Odisha, and hence the devotion for Lord Jagannath is always seen in this dance form. Then again, you have, the Natya Shastra and Abhinay Darpan, again, the two seminal texts which are again forming the foundation for these dance forms. Then there are two techniques of posture. One is Chok, which again is masculine, and Tribhanga, the female stance. The same dancer plays both parts. Like I said, the dance drama forms are not restricted. So it's not that a woman can only play a certain part or a man can only play a certain part. In dance drama, is very fluid in that sense because, and for that matter, I think any form of theater is very fluid. And even if we compare it with the Western counterpart, so during, if we look at the Shakespearean play, so in Shakespearean plays, again, women were not playing the women characters. There were the men who were playing the women characters. Cross-dressing was very popular within the Shakespearean tradition. So cross-dressing is even popular in the Indian tradition. There are many times where, men cross-dress as women. Or as whatever character they're supposed to play. So cross-dressing or playing, playing both the masculine and the feminine. It's all about the fluidity of the nature of this particular art form, be it storytelling or otherwise. This art form is very fluid, which we'll again discuss when we talk about the contemporary scenario. Even in Dastan Goi, like I said, that Dastan Goi at the time when it originated, it was largely the men who were taking the center stage. But then there was a lady Dastan Go who was also, entertaining the women of the house. So the nature of these characters are very fluid, so to speak. Now I'll quickly move forward. Now we again have Kuchipudi coming from Andhra Pradesh. Again, in this although in this particular dance form, the use of speech in the presentation of Kuchipudi, again, very important. Like I said, in some dance dramas, there might be some speech where the Sutradhar comes and narrates a certain part, and then the dancers take the stage. So in this particular, the distinguishing feature is the role of the Sutradhar, which is the narrator. It is accompanied by the typical Carnatic music. The performance begins with each other introducing himself with a dharavu, a small composition of song and dance, and then the Sutradhar announces the theme of the performance. So there will be a theme on which the performance will be centered. Then you have the Satriya dance form, which originated in the 15th century under the great Vaishnava saint Mahapurusha Shankar Dev. So within this tradition, you have the Vaishnava faith is propagated. Again, this particular form is largely performed in Vaishnav mutts or monasteries. The style came to be called as Satriya. So Mohiniyattam is the feminine dance form of Kerala. It has a slow and seductive quality and is performed on sensual themes. Mohini refers to a lady and Attam means dance. So backed by Carnatic music, it is again a form of love and devotion to Lord Krishna and his consort Radha. Usually an off-white sari is worn by the dancer. So again, Mohiniyattam is largely a feminine dance form where the feminine energy is presented. So this is largely, about the dance dramas. Now again, we will be coming back to Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra. So Bharat Muni's again under the tutelage of Bharat Muni, the play Amrit Manthan was performed by his 100 sons, Gandharva and Apsaras. Like I said, it's not that the Natya Shastra has come from somewhere and suddenly started to become so popular. It was believed that this particular play was performed under Bharat Muni's tutelage, Amrit Manthan, and we all know what is the story behind Amrit Manthan. So that story was transformed into a play. And of course you have Lord Brahma saying that this Nat is not created for the specific purpose of representing either you, Danavas, or the Devas. Rather, Nat is the representation of the states of the whole world, which is very true. So theater or oral storytelling is not about representing or taking sides or representing the good or the bad. It is not as black and white as it seems. So theater is very fluid in that sense. Storytelling is very fluid. In fact, when we tell stories to kids, when we tell them stories about animals, or we tell them stories about Jataka tales, there is not so much good and bad in them, as much as what we need to understand is that it's an art form which is very fluid. So hence everybody can have their own interpretations. Like you might read a Panchtantra story as an adult and you will have a very different interpretation as what you had as a child, or you might read a fairy tale now and your interpretation will be very different. So I feel again, this can also be looked at from the lens of the death of the author by Rola Barthes, who's also talking about, how the author, once something is done and it lies with the audience, it is then up to them to interpret it, because the work of the author is done and dusted. The audience then becomes the interpreter. So hence, every state is represented through Natya, through storytelling, through theater. And of course, the birth and purpose of the fifth Veda, Natya Veda, was seen. Natya Shastra is the earliest treatise on dramaturgy. We have already talked about it. It includes the origin and nature of drama, construction of the playhouse. Again, so we think that actually the construction of the playhouse comes from the Globe Theatre, which is coming during the time of Shakespeare. But actually in the Indian knowledge system, you have the theatre construction coming much before that, maybe thousands of years before Shakespeare even existed. So you have the construction of the playhouse, how the stage should be constructed. Should it be rectangular? Should it be a square? Should it be triangular? then you have dance, you have sentiments, you have nat, you have nati, then you have languages, you have styles of action. So everything, every little nuance is covered in the Natya Shastra. Later on in the Western tradition, they have broken it into different parts. So in the Western tradition, it's difficult to find a treatise. Of course, in the modern era, you have lots of work which has been written on theater, on movies. But as old as the Natya Shastra, it's difficult to find something in the Western tradition. Coming back to Natya Shastra is the earliest treatise on dramaturgy. We have already done this, so I will move forward now. Yes. Now, at the time of Panini, two sage writers were there. One was Silyan and one was Krisava. So they wrote about the art of acting in Natya Sutra. So Kautilya in his Arthashastra mentions musicians, dancers, and dramatists. And it also mentions Subandhu writing within an act. Bhasha wrote plays on the stories of Udayan, Ramayana, Mahabharata. Vasab Datta was his written masterpiece. Patanjali's Mahabhashya, written in the 2nd century, refers to several aspects of drama. The performances known as Kamswadha and Bali Badha, Asvaghosha, Mahayana Buddhist wrote a philosophical play on Gautam Buddha. Then English drama, Indian drama was also popular in the religious places. Again, like I said, that it's not just Bharat Muni who's coming up with Natya Shastra. There are a number of people who are right. Even there are a number of people who are criticizing the Natya Shastra. So if we, like I said, Indian literary theory is very, it's tremendous. The extent of Indian literary theory is tremendous. And I or anybody else for that matter cannot do justice to it in a 1-hour lecture. It requires a very, detailed, looking at each and every aspect, because each theory has around 8-9 parts to it. So, it has to be looked at in detail. However, these are the major people who are talking about the art of acting in the same time as, Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra. Then you have again, that drama was and is still a reflection of the true picture of society. It's very true that any form of storytelling tells us how the society is. So when we are talking about fairy tales, when we are talking about damsel in distress, at the time when those fairy tales were written, that was the reality. That women did not have so much of a voice of their own, and hence they needed somebody to come and save them, to protect them. So they reflect the nature of our society. In fact, when any movie is criticized, they always come up with this excuse that, but that's how the society is, which to a certain extent is true, because I don't think that if our plays can be 100%, literature is not apolitical, so hence any art form is not apolitical. Everything will have some of the other politics to it. Plays, movies, everything for that matter. My opinion always has been that nothing can be apolitical. But yes, what kind of politics goes into it, what you talk about in a certain play, that can have different interpretations. So when people started breaking the fourth wall, they started talking to the audience directly. At the time of the World War, the plays which were being written. So, different at different times, different emotions are, conveyed through these art forms. Then again, we have the Greek influence. So, of course, the Greek drama has a major influence on the Indian tradition as well, because Greek drama was actually living up to all the 4 qualities which I have talked about. So, it has a chorus, it has powerful characters, it has characters in costume. So, everything which Greek drama has is reflected in the Indian oral system as well. Now, Bharat describes 10 varieties of plays and a derivative play, Natika, the heroic play Nataka, and a social play, Prakran. So these are 2 varieties. One is Natak, one is Prakran. So the best example of heroic Natak is Kalidas's Abhijana Shakuntalam, and then Vikram, this one is, and his the other play by him, and then Kalidas's Malvika Gnamitra is a good example of Natika. Mrichkatika or King Shudraka is a very big example of social Prakran drama. So you have, 2 kinds of plays. One is heroic, one is social. Even till today, you have plays where, like you you have movies, you have storytelling where, the idea is to give a social message, but there are movies where the idea is to entertain the audience. Hence, the nature of the drama has to be decided. Now, moving further, now I will be coming to a little bit of the contemporary times, not even contemporary, but towards the 90s, I would say. So in 1972, this is a landmark year for Indian theatrics because we have Vijay Tendulkar coming in, who is of course writing the very popular play Ghanshiram Kotwal. It created a storm in the traditional folk forms. Then you have another breed of directors who's coming in. So you have Habib Tanveer, you have Basi Kaul, you have Ratan Thiam, you have Feroz Khan, another director with plays like Tumhari Amrita, Mahatma versus Gandhi, Ramlal Salesman, which is an adaptation of Death of the Salesman by Arthur Miller. Manjula Padmanabhan is coming with very strong plays, and she's also earning the international acclaim with her play Bitter Harvest. Now, again, Manjula Padmanabhan is writing a play, Lights Out, which is a play on, sexual violence. It's a play on rape. These powerful themes are now being addressed. So till a certain time in Indian theatre and Indian storytelling, there were dramatists who were shying away from handling very powerful themes. Because of course there was a sense of, like I said, that it all depends on the politics of the person who's writing it. So some of the writers, they wanted to play it safe. They wanted to stick to a certain theme which was working. But when these writers are coming in, when these playwrights are coming in, they are changing the landscape of Indian theatre. Then this is again being reflected in oral storytelling forms as well. If you now watch a play on Dastan Goi, it's not going to be the same as it was back in the day, in the course of the Mughals. Now it will be a very different, play, or it will be a very different Dastan, which is talking about our types, which is talking about the problems that we are dealing with. So of course that always remains. Then you have Dharamveer Bharti's Andha Yug, which is coming in, which again is inspired from Mahabharata. So I think that day somebody was asking me about the evolution of Mahabharata. So the very evolution of Mahabharata is that it still is being used in plays. The story is being formed the basis, like you have Rashmi Rathi. So Rashmi Rathi is again, it's a poem on Mahabharata, which, when I was doing theater at a time, we translated it into a play, a full-length play. So these plays are again taking inspiration from the stories of Mahabharata, from the stories of Ramayana. Ram Leela, of course, as a storytelling form is happening. Then you have Girish Karnad. Girish Karnad is again a very big name in Indian theater. So he is taking a lot of, inspiration from Mahabharata, from the stories of Mahabharata, from the stories of Ramayana. So Girish Karnad is coming with Yayati, Tughlaq, Fire in the Rain. Habib Tanveer is a very popular, storyteller. He's coming with, tribal theatrical forms. Again, inspiration is coming from tribal theater forms. He's coming up with Mitti Ki Gaadi. Mohan Rakesh is coming up with, another set of plays. So I feel now in the 90s, the storytellers are dealing with bolder themes. The themes are changing, the times are changing. And once you move towards the 1990s, when you have other playwrights coming in, you have Mahesh Dattani coming in, even themes like homosexuality, themes like gay love are being dealt with. So as we if you look at the plays now, again, very powerful themes. A lot of translation is coming in. So again, as time progresses, the nature of storytelling is also changing. We will talk about this in the last session when we talk about digital storytelling. Now you have storytelling which is dealing with almost everything under the sun. Now you have storytelling which is dealing with post-humanist themes. So what is the influence of AI? So you have stories centered around that as well. So so we will be dealing with that as well. But my intention of this session was to focus on three primary things. One is dance drama, one is the importance of music in dance drama and storytelling, and the third one was to take you through a brief look at how Indian theatre is also evolving alongside, because theatre is a very it forms the backbone of storytelling. So there's still a part of the population which is still interested in watching theatre. So yes, theater, and theater is a very powerful medium. So that is also one of the things which I wanted to cover. And now, of course, India again has the oldest and largest film industry. So we have Raja Harishchandra, which is the first commercial film. So again, you have now within the film industry, though there have always been two forms of films. One is the parallel cinema, the art house cinema, which I personally feel, like Pathar Panchali was the pioneer of Indian parallel cinema. So you have, you have in theater. There's no such bifurcation. So theater is universal in that sense. But within film industry, you have two forms. So one is the commercial and one is the parallel cinema. So parallel cinema, they believe, is not very popular because people do not want to see the reflection of society so much. They want to see something which is larger than life. But anyway, again, like I said, film industry also is a very bigger backbone of storytelling. Then you have various types of dramas which are flourishing. So you have stage theater, you have radio theater, you have nukkad plays. Lots of nukkad plays are performed by college students every year. You have nukkad nataks happening almost in every university now. You have monodrama, musical theater, one act plays. In fact, the participants who were asking me about how can we implement it in class. So one of the things, like right now with my students, I'm teaching them a paper on translation. So what I do is I have taken a play which is called Ashar Ka Ek Din, which is by Mohan Rakesh, and the play is translated as One Day in the Season of Rain. We are reading that play in class, the translated version. So you can take up all these are all methods of teaching them stories, because otherwise they will neither read the Hindi version or the English version. So the best thing would be to make them do any of these small art forms. Even a skit can be performed, let's say, in 5 minutes. If you're teaching them at the school level, you can talk about any moral quality. Let's say we'll do a skit on wisdom, a 6-minute, 7-minute skit. If you're teaching college students, you can make them read plays in translation. You can ask them to do enactment, because they're certainly, they are adults, so they can easily manage to come up with a 10-15 minute play in class, and it does not take so much time, can be easily done even in online form. So I think storytelling is, it's not very theoretical. It has a lot to do with the practical aspect. So I feel storytelling cannot be taught. If I have to teach storytelling, I will definitely look at the larger practical aspect of storytelling. So I guess we will stop the session today, because after that, we have Indian literary theory, which I'll not be focusing on today, as it will take some time. And I guess we can have questions now, if there are any. If there are any questions, you can either put it in the chat box, or you can, unmute yourself, whatever works. Please let me know any questions that you have. I would be in the session for another 2-3 minutes, so you can drop the questions now. Any questions, anyone? I would also suggest that you go through, I would say, that you go through the research papers that I have shared, because that will also help. So please go through the research papers, because they will also form a foundation of, what has to be covered. So please go through the research papers, because like I said, see, whatever I am talking about in the FDP is very surface level knowledge, I would say. If you want to get down deep in this topic, you will have to read research papers. You will have to look at the different storytelling forms. It is very difficult to cover everything in 1 hour, because, it's a very extensive topic also. IKS is a very extensive branch, but a little bit of background study would help. So yeah. Any questions, anything that I would be of help, you can ask. Okay, I don't think there are any questions. So then I think we can close the session for today. I will be seeing all of you tomorrow. Pradyuman sir, I think then we can close the session. There's not much to be, I don't think there are any questions. Okay, so I think we can close the session. So I think that's all for today's session. We'll be meeting tomorrow now. Tomorrow is the second last day of the FDP.